So we're going to have one last session here today. I think this actually might be a really interesting one because I think this is something where everyone's got some experience with, and so we welcome you all to jump in and share some ideas. I know I've talked with many of you already about some solutions, some people using Unity 3D. We were going to follow up, or we'll see Cal VR tomorrow, which has some model viewing. And so we want to show one that's more based on open standards with X3D, and one that's based on a commercial solution, Virtools, that we use here. And then again, I think this is an area that is some nice low-hanging fruit. It's a quick way to get into VR, and so I think somewhere we can share experiences. So again, what do we mean by model viewing? Again, basically just taking a file, loading it up into an application, and going with it there. It's an easy way to get started with VR. It's an easy way to span a variety of applications and get them into VR, so people can kind of take their favorite application, export it, export the data, load it into a common VR viewer, and just go with it. So why is this? Why wouldn't you want to do this? It doesn't really show the medium in its best form. It's just, it's quite often just a static model, and so you don't have the interaction and the manipulation that makes VR special. And usually, if you're talking in terms of visualization, so for example, ParaView has a really great VRML and X3D exporter. VMD does as well. But then you have just that one representation, represented as polygons. So you've lost all the meaning of the data and the more interesting sorts of interactions. It can also be much bigger and much bulkier to deal with than the original data in many cases. So many of the what are your options? You certainly have commercial tools that we'll show one example that you can use. Many of the VR libraries that you might want to adopt, whether it be VRUI, FreeVR has one that uses Open Scene Graph. Cal VR has one that is based on Open Scene Graph as well. So that it's often built into whatever library you're using. You can roll your own, pick your favorite scene graph, pair that with your favorite VR library. The VR library, as most of you know, has to have some kind of hooks into that particular scene graph so the two can negotiate the rendering right away. You decide what file formats you might want to use. OBJ file was very popular back in the day. Collada is a common asset interchange format, VRML, and now X3D. Then you also have to think about, again, what are the interaction styles that you want to have? How do you want to navigate? Is it more natural to manipulate that model, thinking of it as an object that you would pick up and turn as opposed to a world that you would walk through or fly through? So I will propose, I know a lot of people saying, VRML or X3D, is that still alive? It very much is. And so my position is not even terribly popular within my own lab, but I think it has a lot of benefits. So hear me out. And it's an option that I think everyone should strongly consider. Just a little bit of history. VRML goes all the way back to some early work from SGI. If those of you who've been around a really long time, Ted, you remember Open Inventor. And so they actually took their file format and offered that as really the first, the VRML 1 format for doing web-based sharing of virtual worlds. That was a good start, but it was really boring because, again, they were models, and people could also look at models using a desktop application. So they did a major reworking to add in a lot of interaction, interactors, animations, kind of an event routing model. So you could think of very object-oriented scene graph and how events propagate through and trigger certain animations and such. The ability to script, they called this the Living World standard, eventually became a VRML 97, which is an ISO standard. That was a significant improvement, but it was also very cumbersome for people to actually implement. And so there were very few fully complete implementations of that. X3D was an effort that started early 2000s to kind of make it a little more manageable. So they tried to break out all of the various components. So hence the name Extensible 3D. Also an ISO standard, so they have a new style XML coding as well as a VRML 97 style syntax, which would look familiar for those of you familiar with Open Inventor or some of the Performer file formats. There's very separate components for things like H&M, the Human Animation Standard, geospatial, I think they call it X3D Earth now, augmented reality, medical visualization, so basically a way to bring in DICOM volumes into those environments, NURBS, and so on. And they're actually even taking it now and having what they call the X3D document object model so that you can actually embed these straight into HTML5 compliant browsers. And what's nice about the standards process, there's always the joke about standards. The great thing about standards is there's so many to choose from. But what it really does, I think in this case, is it brings a lot of perspectives. I think especially having kind of gone through 3 major iterations, they figured out kind of what works, what hasn't. So it does represent sort of the best thinking of the community, and it ends up being well documented to get through the standards process. So again, I already talked about some of these advantages. The nice thing with X3D over some things like Unity or Virtools is that it's an open standard, so you really have that preservation of your content. We're actually coming up on an issue with Virtools where they're going to stop developing that or stop supporting that about a year from now, and they'll have a new product, and so they'll be happy to continue to take our money and we'll be able to create new content, but we have no way to really go back and capture that old content. We can, of course, re-import the assets from Maya or 3D Studio Max and redo the animations, redo the interactions, but that's a lot of work, so we'd like to have something that allows us to preserve it as best as possible. So if you have an open file format that's human readable, and then you also have some open source implementations, maybe they're not the greatest, but at least you're not, totally stuck. I even went back and found some stuff that was I did in 1999 with before it actually became standardized, and I was able to read half of them. There are some small errors in some of the other ones in a modern day browser. You have multiple development methods. You can make your model. So if some students just want to model in Maya and they want to have a simple way to do it, they can do that. They can do some simple events, so they can put a trigger around something or a proximity sensor. So if you get close to something, it might trigger some behavior. So it's actually a really nice introduction if any of you are involved in teaching classes or working with students. It's a nice way to get them from the visual modeling into the process of thinking about programming. And of course, you can do Java and JavaScript, and many of these you can actually just drop down and use the C++ libraries that were used to build the browser to add your own nodes and such. It's compatible with the web, so you can not only serve up the content by providing someone a URL, but you can link to hypertext documents, you can link to other X3D or VRML worlds. I already talked about there being export from many packages, and it's been extended to many modalities. In fact, the 2 best implementations that I've used. So these are completely open source, more desktop oriented. Free World is one came from the Canadian Research Council, and it's very complete implementation of the standard. For those of you who are more C++ oriented, that's the one to go with. If you're a Java lover, there's one called XJ3D. It's not as robust of an implementation, but you can actually grab a drink of water here. You can, if Java's your thing, then that's a good one for you to look at. There are 2 that have been extended to other modalities. One is H3D. I think you have to actually, like if you Google, you put H3D API, all as one word, because there's something else that goes to H3D. But actually, if any of you remember the folks who did the co-located haptics system, the reach-in, just to the right of Mike there is our old reach-in system. But it used a half-silver mirror to put the haptics and the graphics in the same physical space for a very compelling haptics experience. Some of those folks spun off and did an open source library, again, based around X3D, but they extended the notion of the scene graph to not only be able to render, but also to provide haptic input and haptic feedback. And that one is open source. The one we're going to show mostly today is Instant Reality. This is a Fraunhofer project. It unfortunately is not open source. It is freely available. It's multi-platform, so Mac, Windows, Linux. H3D is also on all three platforms as well. So that's nice. And yeah, so I think that's all. And so we'll just jump into a few implementations, then we'll come back and look at Virtools. So I must admit, none of these were actually done for full VR. We do have, I have tested some Kinect capabilities with Instant Reality through, it does Kinect tracking. We've had Wiimote sensor input. And so these things actually do work. It's just a matter of they haven't been driven from the particular needs we have. So actually what I have here is a little window, and it's actually got 4 different viewports. So for the 3 walls and the floor. And so this is actually kind of nice when you're developing. And then of course you can just full screen it. And oh, I think we need the 30 to, oh, can we, are we, yeah, if we don't, we'll crush Bill out of the way. So when we were building our building, so this is a furniture design review, and when we were doing our building in Bloomington, the powers that be were interested in comparing various furniture configurations. You'll have to watch very carefully to see the difference there, but there were 6 different vendors that came in, and with some concerted effort on Jeff's part, we were actually able to turn this around in just a week. So is the stereo okay? So here is our lovely open concept environment. And so what I've done over here is, you know, in VR you can have a little, or in X3D you can make your own little widgets. And so each of these has a, you know, a touch sensor associated with them. This is not the world's best user interface. It's very poorly labeled, but it works without getting into a bunch of mouse interactions. So we can actually cycle through a number of furniture configurations. And again, this is pretty straightforward to do. There's a switch node, and so basically you make a master file, take each of these furniture files that were provided by the various furniture manufacturers in SketchUp format, and we were able to implement them. To make it fair for everybody, we actually put in we put in an animated path. So we were trying to be careful. We had people who are not used to VR, and so we wanted to make sure that we didn't have somebody charging through the scene, creating motion sickness, and introducing other artifacts, so people could see the lovely configurations and our lovely SketchUp people that we put in here. Some of the nice things, you know, so you see I'm in sort of a hybrid mode, so we're kind of fully immersive here, but I'm using the fact that we have these menus that come up by default as part of the Instant Reality player. So I have built in some cameras so we can go to various predefined viewpoints. This was, the models were made in SketchUp and then exported into X3D format. And Jeff used, I think, Okino translator?
I think so.
Okay. New graph, yes. Thank you. That's the more common. So we can like peel back the roof, again, which is a simple hide node. And these are some nice things that can get students used to thinking about, switches and cycles and so forth. We can of course stop the animation on the camera. Again, one of the nice little benefits that Fraunhofer's put in is a number of shadow rendering algorithms. Unfortunately, they don't work in real time, but just by setting a flag in there, rather than going through and writing our own shading algorithm or pre-baking in our textures, we get something that makes it look more realistic. But then you can see, of course, the frame rate will really plummet here. And in the interest of time, I won't watch that chugging along. Here, so now watch carefully to see which furniture configuration is the best. Part of the problem here was, as you might guess, that one would be preferred by some staff. Anyway, the thing was over constrained, so they didn't really give the vendors much leeway in terms of the layout, and so everyone kind of, unfortunately, it was a little bit of a failure, and they said, well, any of them would be fine. Yes, James.
Moving the frame rate was rather slow. Do you know what the current bottleneck is?
Yes, when this exported, so rather than each of those carols came out as a completely separate set of geometry. So rather than it being instanced, so that is, yeah. So we had a week to do it, and it would have been a matter of going into, well, I think SketchUp handled it well, but then the translation process out of SketchUp is the main place where there's tons more geometry in here than needs to be. If we turn off the furniture, it goes pretty fast. In fact, I think that's again, one of the nice things that you can actually do is I think we can get some notion. I'm getting kind of nonsense here, but in one of these, here we can get some sense of our frame rate. And so again, this is actually built on Instant Reality is built on top of OpenSG. So I think it'll use the best optimization that OpenSG provides. But again, so it's different than if one were operating with OpenGL, where you kind of have control of everything, and so but that's part of the beauty, is that you're saying, I don't care what I'm getting in return is some fast turnaround, some very rapid prototyping of things, and so again, that but it's nice to at least be able to go in and see. So this is all the stuff that OpenSG is providing there. I think we could toggle various light sources and so forth, and so there. I think that's all I want to say about that. And there's a section in there. So it's basically a standard X3D file, but there is a section in there where you have to add in information about the layout of the viewports and the number of screens there. So one of the other advantages of it was, did I mention robust? Grab one more, or two more examples here. Okay, I haven't tested this. One of the, there it is. One of the nice advantages that VRML and X3D had, coming from that intention of being web enabled, is that they have native built-in hyperlinks so that you can actually link out from an environment to a web page, or in the example I'll show after this, we can use a web page then to control the environment. So this was a project with a professor at at Purdue, West Lafayette, Soren Matei. And I don't think that's coming up in stereo, is it? That is correct. Okay. Well, Bill, you've control. Yes, he's got a stereo virus. Anyhow, so this is actually some student work that was done with Professor Matei. His project's called the Visible Past. Some of you have probably seen some of these things that are built into Google Earth in terms of trying to bring history to life and to put information into its geospatial context and its and so forth. So this is a model of Omaha Beach that was done by students. It suffered from the same problem that and this was the students' fault, that every landing craft, even though they're all the same, comes across as different geometry. And so part of the process would be to really educate them on ways to create these environments more optimally. But there's good learning opportunities there. Nonetheless, we got it done. And what this then allowed us to do is so if you're, I'm in examine mode. So what's nice about instant reality is that it'll have these various navigation modes. So if you wanted to, grab the world and just, examine it, if you had a molecule, you just make a menu selection or a keyboard selection. If you want to walk, slide, game type controller, that stuff's all built in. You can override it and write your own stuff as well. But the nice thing, much like Vrui, but even with a much in a much simpler way, that you're able to test out those various modalities and figure out which one works the best. So you can storm the beach. And the students were really good about, very detailed cannons and machine guns. So I'll just page through some viewports. Oops. Yeah, there's one. So again, getting a sense of what it looks like going out over the, or being in a pillbox there. These little markers we made to sort of mimic a, they work with Google Maps to actually, oh, good. So it's, Firefox decided to update itself, but it will come up. Hopefully, it'll actually find the. No, I updated this file. Okay. So, one of the beauties about putting things on the web is that URLs never go stale. But I'm sorry, I thought we actually had this. Oh, I'm sorry. There's the one with my great naming scheme. So, yeah. So yeah, this I knew it had the stereo fixed. And so actually, this one we actually found that if we did a small enough, did wide enough field of view, that it was just easier for the students just to sort of fake it around. So then as I take the mouse, we really should have this with the wand, but again, in the interest of time, let me get to one that has a known, so we should be able to find information on, there we go, there's their website, and it'll bring up their Google map, so these are supposed to be 3D little map markers, and then you can, I think the students ended up plagiarizing a lot of Saving Private Ryan. So if you go to many of these pillboxes, they have, scenes from the movie there. But anyway, again, so you can actually link your, the nice thing about this is that you can link your virtual environment into an online web. It's a little, one could also imagine a situation where you're you're running on a tablet and you could force the content onto a tablet, which would be probably how we would try to do it now. This project is about 4 years old. Questions on that one? And one more simple little one, again, which actually I don't think even comes up in in stereo is, but again, it will launch the instant reality player. And then this is some data from Eric and his colleagues at Idaho National Labs. And this is a materials analysis. And so again, this is not in stereo. We actually originally did this configured with side-by-side stereo. And let me load up the corresponding HTML page. But the manufacturer of this piece of equipment, which is one of only 7 in the nation, which actually does atom-by-atom material analysis. They had already used VRML to embed an export of the data from their instrument along with some controls, and these are just controls written in JavaScript. Normally, if you would use a web plugin like Cortana or Octaga, or they're becoming harder and harder to find, but they would actually appear, in a frame inside your web browser, so along with these controls. But then the nice thing is that just by clicking on this box here, and again, this does actually work on a separate machine as well, and it can hook up with this. So again, when we're thinking about the user interfaces, this sort of stuff is pretty simple for students to do, and what makes sense to keep in 2D to put onto a tablet or onto a monoscopic screen, and what makes sense to have in stereo. So we can turn off the various things. We can turn on, hide some of these ISO surfaces. Maybe a hide all button would have been nice, but we can delve down into. So I think again a walk mode, so I can switch quickly over to an examine view. Look at the various types of data. I can turn on a clipping plane and so forth. So, obviously we could spend a whole day looking at this and looking at all the various options that you have with it. But I did want to show this as, again, not an open source implementation, but an open standard. Again, the cool thing about instant reality is they've gone on and done video tracking, a lot of things with augmented reality. They've got some neat things with Connect and facial recognition. I would use those things with caution, because those things, if they decide to go away, then everything that uses those extras that they've added in would go away too. But again, your core, this model will be here forever. Because we have our open source implementations, JavaScript and the link into that are very standard and so forth. So anyhow, so the other thing we wanted to show you, the things that are better VR applications, are things that the Advanced Visualization Lab has done using Virtools. Virtools, I think, they got to start in '93. They were bought by Dassault Systems, the same people who do CATIA, in 2005, and then a year later rebranded as 3D VIA. So again, it was to be able to do VR and interactive graphics. Here's the problem there. So it's actually been very, very popular with a number of students, especially those who are less technical students in art and design areas. But now they're dropping support, and then there's no way to migrate those applications. So you guys are on the farewell tour for these applications. Now, fortunately, the workflow is such that again, the assets can be imported into their new thing called 3D Via Studio. But again, it's the pitfall with anything. And I don't know. Question for folks who are using Unity: is their file format an open format? Is their file format an open format? Okay, they do. But then, like, does when you import a Maya file, do you get animations that come along with that? And,
You get animations, you get unfortunately hierarchies that you use because of line build. Now there are many problems that are caused when you bring in straight from the project file. Such as, like for example, if you have multiple what do you call it? Texture UV map, you only support two. If you have like 10, that causes a problem. You have to install the FX4, you go into your import. So just for the convenience before we mostly use what we did. But like quick and dirty, hey, I got a model, let's throw it in, grab the project file, put it in.
that's a nice step forward because I think Virtools you have to convert everything. No, you can do you can load a Maya file directly. Oh, okay. Oh. See, I'm stuck back in 2006 with X3D. So anyway, one of the nice things about Virtools is, again, it gives you that multiple ways to interact with it. Here's the graphical user interface where you can kind of drag and drop. You can link boxes together, so you have some notion of an event model and how that event propagates through. And if a sensor is triggered, it will fire off something. Again, like most good tools, it will integrate with the content creation packages. VR is an additional add-on, and it does actually have the web player too. So again, you can, I don't know if it can actually do like hyperlinks out or links to other worlds, but at least you can put stuff online and people can, gives people yet another way to experience it. So Mike, why don't I throw it over to you and let you talk about some of the Virtools.
No, it's Mike. No, it's Mike.
Okay.
You're used to talking in here now. Let me move Harry into the building. Like, fire that up, please. Kill those requests you want. Oh. Okay, so yeah, let me just show you guys a couple of quick